Small, powerful things are the little changes we can make that yield long-term results toward becoming more resilient so we can realize our fullest potential. This podcast contains interviews with people who tell us about the small, powerful things they do to build resilience and strength. If you want to get calm enough to tackle all that life is throwing at us, we need to be able to manage how bad it feels when we're stressed out or anxious or depressed. And one tool that's been found to be helpful, and personally I use this a lot, is mindfulness or mindful meditation. So we're going to talk with our guest today about how she uses mindfulness as a special education professional and to help her manage her own stress reactions. You know what those are. Those are the flight or fight or freeze feelings that we get when something overwhelms us. Dr. Jamie Candelaria Greene has a PhD in special ed from UC Berkeley and teaching credentials in special ed, and is also a clinician working with children in the Bay Area. But her interest in learning extends even more to the animal species, where she's done research on the East African mountain gorilla population, and she's also written a seminal work on societal pain. We're lucky to have her. Dr. Candelaria Greene, thank you for being here.
Oh, I'm so happy to be with you today.
So what got you involved in meditation? And when did you start? How long have you been meditating?
6 or 7 years ago, I was worrying so much. I was worrying so much that I was realizing that it was taking up a huge part of my very thought processes. Morning, noon, and night, I was thinking about the past, worrying about the future, and I was starting to realize, putting my learning specialist hat on, that it was actually starting to affect my problem-solving abilities so that I could simply work it out and put a period at the end of it and move on. Well, being an educational researcher, I looked to the research, and about that time, more and more was coming into the research about the helpfulness to the body and mind when we do mindfulness and mindfulness meditation. And so, as luck would have it, around that time, a Buddhist group was doing a simple community outreach about providing these free mindfulness meditations in our community. And I thought that I would attend and find out more about it. And what I started to notice fairly quickly is that whether I was meditating in a group or if I were meditating just by myself with a simple little candle in front of me for about 5 or 6 minutes in the morning, I would notice it just gave me a little break from my worries.
I have to say that I find the same things. One is the ability to turn your brain off. My brain is racing, or I'm constantly worried about things and I don't know how to stop. And I think a lot of times what we do is find substances, I could just drink a lot, do something crazy that gets my mind out of, my worries. And what ends up happening is you create more worry when you do things like that.
Well, I'd love it if listeners could reflect back on what they needed to get through school. And when I think of that, I think of A's, B's, C's, and D pluses. Think of how they stand for something that'll get us through life. And in this case, the A is going to stand for attention, where we're putting our attention. And that's going to affect what we learn and how we feel. And the idea of attention is very central to mindfulness meditation. And the second thing is B, the letter B. And in this case, that's going to stand for breath and breathing, because we know that breathing, how we breathe, is going to play a powerful role in how we deal with stress. We can use it to give us quick energy, and we can also use it to calm ourselves down. And that leads us to C, which is calming the central nervous system. It allows for more access to decision making and reasoning and problem solving. We'll even talk about how calming the nervous system down can affect sports and learning and other things. And then the D plus, in this case, simply stands for do positive things for ourselves and for others. And that's going to help our brains and bodies too. Acts of generosity, we know, can make a huge difference in our well-being.
This is also just really good centering advice for everything, for how do you get through school, how do you learn a new process or trick or, a new skill. And then that connection to our ability to think better or just organize our thoughts better. And I don't know how that works, in our brain, what's happening in our brain, but something happens where suddenly things that seem disorganized and crazy making feel calmer and more organized.
Well, and you're right as rain, because of course, when you do have even little moments of rest or breathing or other things we'll talk about today, it gives it gives the brain the ability to recoup energies to be able to problem solve.
I get confused myself about the difference, if there is one, between mindfulness and meditation. Is there a difference? I mean, sometimes we call it mindfulness, sometimes we call it meditation, sometimes we call it mindfulness meditation. What is the distinction, if there is one?
Yes. Well, let's talk about mindfulness first. I like this one definition: bringing awareness to the present moment on purpose and without judgment. And when I think of mindfulness too, I think about this one wonderful psychiatrist named Viktor Frankl. He was a Holocaust survivor, and he lived in 4 concentration camps. He was a guy who wrote Man's Search for Meaning. And this is what Dr. Frankl said: between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. All of us have daily stresses and traumas and even those neural networks, those patterns that are developed from mechanisms that are all designed to protect us from danger or overwhelm or shame. And all of these triggers can just gobble up that space between, as Dr. Frankl says, stimulus and response. That if we don't have that space, we run into the risk of reacting in ways that we know are unproductive and sometimes disastrous if we're not careful. So basically having that space, having that mindfulness helps empower a person to basically slow down.
Yeah, I mean, it's like someone says to you, I was minding my own business, and then so-and-so came up to me and said something. Before I knew it, bam, I smacked them, or I didn't know where that came from. Well, that's that not having that space in between the stimulus, the thing that triggered you, that you may not even be aware of why it triggered you. It just
exactly.
And like you said, we're attuned to protect ourselves. I mean, that's kind of the basis of who we are. If we kind of boil ourselves down, is that we have a mind and body that's that even subconsciously is always kind of scanning for protection and safety. And yes. If we even get an inkling deep down inside, somehow I'm not safe, even feelings like you said, shame can make you lash out immediately without understanding why. And so that mindfulness time, that practice starts to create that space in between. Why was I triggered? Why was I triggered? You start asking those questions. What's happening to me right now? Why do I feel like hitting that person or screaming or running away?
Yes.
Let's talk about what happens in your body when you do that, the mindfulness or meditation practice. What is actually happening to help your body stay calm? I mean, we kind of tend to think of mindfulness and meditation as just being for your head. Do you have any examples of how mindfulness can calm down that central nervous system?
I sure can. Remember at the beginning, we were talking about this aspect of attention, just paying attention, and how that's going to have a central role in calming down. And I think about how several years ago, but I was at my daughter's convocation ceremony when she was a freshman at college. And this is a very fancy, solemn occasion when professors walk down in their robes and greet the freshmen at the university. And I was in the audience, and I was so proud of my daughter, and I became overwhelmed with emotion. And I realized that I was on the brink of melting down in tears. And the last thing you want is for your daughter to look up and think, oh dear, what's wrong with my mom? Fortunately for me, I happened to be standing right next to my sister, who happens to be a psychologist. And I said, help, help. And she said, Jamie, look down at your shoes. And I immediately looked down at my shoes. And then she asked me a series of questions. She said, for example, what color are your shoes? And how shiny is the fabric? And how does that fabric feel on your toes and your heels? And how many inches do you think are from your big toe to your small toe, or your big toe to your heel? And just by her asking those questions, I wasn't even answering them aloud, but just as I turned my attention to something that wasn't as emotionally charged as seeing my wonderful daughter be in this great place, my central nervous system just started calming down. It was as if I had been looking at white, fluffy clouds in the sky. Even after about 30 seconds, that enabled me to calm down and to start taking in the moment and enjoying the ceremony.
That's a really wonderful, kind of a trick that you can carry in your back pocket. So if you feel overwhelmed by anger, sadness, shame, kind of these really deep, sometimes overwhelming and maybe out of control, that's really what mindfulness is in so many ways, is just being able to focus in a way that allows you to get yourself kind of back in order.
Yes. Yeah. And one central component of mindfulness is where we're putting our attention.
So what's actually happening in the body and the brain that causes this shift?
As soon as our brains get the idea that we're in danger, or if there's high emotion, the an automatic system called the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system come into play. And the sympathetic nervous system is designed to just kick into action in moments of stress. And so our heart rate goes up and our blood pressure goes up, even our number of breaths per minute go up, and it's all designed to protect us. Now, if it senses high emotion, tears can start happening, and it might not even know the difference between whether I'm at a funeral of a loved one or in a happy occasion, such as a wedding or my daughter being at this convocation. Sometimes it doesn't know the difference, but it just kicks in. And it depends on the parasympathetic nervous system to be able to calm us back down. And there are a number of ways to do that. I mean, in that instance, I was able to just look down at my shoes and take my attention away from something that was so emotionally charged. However, another go-to way to kick in that parasympathetic nervous system that helps calm us down is simple breathing. And the noted musician, Levi Huffman, who's also a performer, has a wonderful idea for just taking us out of sympathetic to parasympathetic during the day. He suggests, for example, putting a little Post-it next to your rear view mirror in your car. And every time you come to a stoplight, taking 3 full deep breaths and then exhaling just a few seconds longer than your intake breath. And that alone will help shift you during the day from your sympathetic nervous system and response and responding to stress, etc., to the more calming parasympathetic nervous system.
This is how I think of it. So tell me if I'm wrong. That kind of we're kind of going through our day, and there are parts of us that are kind of scanning and taking in what's coming at us, the stimuli from outside the world. And sometimes we can get overwhelmed with fear or feelings of vulnerability or other kind of very strong emotions. And that comes from the sympathetic nerves kick in and say, okay, maybe go into fight or flight, or you get a little bit anxious, or, something starts happening. And then you have the parasympathetic, which is, as I understand it, a little bit, that's stuff that we can kind of control, which is how much we're breathing. Are we kind of sitting down or, doing things that kind of can calm us down, like a mindfulness exercise, doing some counting, that's kind of the famous way, count to 10 before you say something. And that starts to allow us to have some control to bring ourselves back into a sense of balance. Is that kind of a way to describe it?
Exactly. And remember that we all need our sympathetic nervous system, because as a species, we wouldn't have been able to survive without it. We need those shots of adrenaline that the sympathetic nervous system produces in case we run into a tiger or we run into a bully and we need to defend ourselves or other things. But to have those constant states of stress aren't good for our brains, and they're not even helpful in the short run because they do other things as well. For example, people might not be aware of how it can even affect your vision. We know, for example, that if you go into a state of fight flight, that you can develop what's called tunnel vision, your periphery. You're not seeing as well on the sides as you ordinarily would, because all of your attention is straight ahead to battle that opponent. And also memory takes a dive. Different kinds of memory, short-term memory, and your working memory, different kinds of memory are sacrificed too, because all of your energy is devoted to just get out of danger.
And this is something that I try to share, especially with our young people that we talk to, is just how often we have these automatic responses, and it can often, we can often feel like ashamed of them, like, oh my God, why did I shut down, for example? Because we have fight or flight, and then we also have this freeze response.
Yes.
Someone said something to me and I just froze and I didn't say anything back and I didn't know what to say. And you just get that horrible feeling of just like cold water washing all over your body. And you just feel like, and then afterwards you say, why didn't I do something? Why did I say something? And then you feel more embarrassed. And I just try to show how our bodies and our minds are really set up to try to protect us. It's just such a loving thing in a way that our brains and bodies do, to try to protect us from things that are really just terrible or not nice or harmful to us, or that could feel harmful or could remind us of something that happened. And so we should be getting to know ourselves better and understanding those responses, because it just shows how we're set up and how protective we are for ourselves.
And that goes along perfectly with this idea of do positive and say positive things to yourself, because when you mentioned about freezing, it's part of your brain doing the very best it can. It knows what to do to take care of yourself at the moment. An extreme of that sympathetic nervous system is not only this idea of fight or flight and freeze, as you say, but also collapse, where in the worst case scenario, the individual collapses. And, the idea
passes out.
It passes out.
Mm-hmm.
You hear about playing possum, but part of it is where the system just is so overwhelmed that it collapses. Being compassionate towards yourself, that this is part of our bodies and brains that take care of ourselves. And sometimes it doesn't have good outcomes, but it's doing the best it can.
So that's mindfulness, that kind of that ability to be in the present moment and recognize that something has triggered me and there's a space in between before I react, where I can get some sense of balance over my reactions, those automatic reactions. So how is that different from meditation?
Mindfulness meditation, when we think about a meditation, that's an actual exercise. Think of it as a practice or a tool or a format to explore and expand and develop mindfulness. And of course, as we talked about before, mindfulness is simply increasing our understanding of our behavior. And so the practice of mindfulness meditation just focuses on building awareness and acceptance of the present moment. And basically, by practicing this, we're just working to strengthen those neural networks of attention and concentration and calmness. So like anything else, like learning a second language or playing chess or perfecting tennis, you're just making those neural connections stronger and stronger. There are some common elements of a group practice, for example, where you're sitting in comfortable clothes, you're paying attention to your environment. which is hopefully neutral, not too many extraneous sounds. Think of it as the ultimate safe space where they're agreed upon. I'm not going to hurt anybody physically or mentally. This is a safe space, although it can certainly be practiced independently as well.
So meditation is like you are going to the gym and you're doing weightlifting exercises so that when the time comes when you need to, hit the ball really hard or do something, you've got the musculature to do that. So meditation is like the gym, and mindfulness is the practice, the ability to then utilize the skills that you develop, those muscles that you developed in meditation. You think that's an apt way of looking at it?
Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
So can we do a mindfulness meditation that we can do together, and everyone can listen, and if you're driving, don't do this, but if you're in a place where you can stop and do a few minutes of meditation, Dr. Candelaria Greene, can you do a meditation for us? Lead one for us?
Yes. Well, let's all start with finding a relaxed and comfortable place to be. And it might be in a chair or just sitting on the floor on a cushion. And let yourself sit with your back upright, but not too tight. And your arms just resting where they're comfortable. And as we soften and close our eyes, we start by taking a deep belly breath. Deep, just let it go down to just below your belly button. In and out. Let's do it 2 more times. Let a deep belly breath in and out. In and out. And as we turn our attention to our breath, going in and out, we're starting to notice that when one breath ends, the next breath begins. Breathing in, we notice that we're breathing in. Breathing out, we notice that we are breathing out. And as our breath moves in and out to nourish us, one breath at a time, what sensations are we feeling? In our nostrils, in our throat, our chest, and our abdomen. And as we continue to breathe in and out, let's turn our attention to gratitude and to loving compassion for our breath and for all those other parts of us that serve us constantly throughout our lifetimes. Let's think of our senses, our eyes, ears, our sense of touch, our sense of smell, and taste. They all take information. For us, limbs that carry out our tasks, and our mighty and ever faithful brains that work constantly to take in information and to translate what it means for our safety and well-being. And when necessary, direct a response. All in efforts to serve us and help us. As we meditate, we might notice that our mind starts to wander sometimes, and other thoughts are coming into our field of attention. But this is okay. And as you notice this, you can perhaps name it as a thought or an idea. And you can gently redirect your attention right back to your breathing. In and out. In and out. And finally, as we continue to breathe in and out, we're going to turn our attention to another part of our body that faithfully serves us throughout our lives. It's our hearts. Our hearts continue to beat onward, whether we are consciously aware of its work or not. And right now, I just invite you to put the palm of your hand across your heart and give it a caress of comfort and gratitude. And as you return your hand to a comfortable place, just continue breathing in and out. And while staying present and alert, hold yourself with that space of kindness and compassion. And let us extend this kindness and compassion towards others who are perhaps in the room or to our family who may not be with us. Let's extend this kindness and compassion to others in our community and in our town, and then to all thinking and feeling beings everywhere, humans and animals alike. And lastly, may we remember this moment of refuge and peace. We have just given ourselves in this mindfulness practice, as we go about our day. And as we come to the end of this meditation, let's return to normal breathing as we reestablish contact with the ground or our chairs. And when we're ready, let's softly open our eyes and let's look to the left of us slowly, and then to the center, straight ahead, and then slowly to the right of us. Before we look back to our center and continue on.
I want to say that for me, putting my hand on my heart and just giving my heart gratitude, I could feel it in my own body. Like my heart felt like it was warmer and it swelled a little bit. And just think if we could do that at least once a day to comfort ourselves.
Yes. As a learning specialist who works with students and adults who are going to college and just folks trying to take good care of their brains for the long haul, my feeling is that I can't not mention mindfulness meditation, because there's so much information about how it helps the body and mind. It helps the students learn and pay attention. It helps them on tests. And even when it comes to student athletes, I was thinking about, for example, last night's game with the Warriors that was recently on, and I was thinking
They won the championship.
Yes, and I was thinking about Stephen Curry and how one absolutely needs to have a calm central nervous system, because if they don't, they're simply not going to be playing as well. And one example of that is that, as we were talking about earlier, with this tunnel vision that can happen when your sympathetic nervous system kicks in and you're in high fight or flight, Stephen Curry wouldn't have been able to see to have his peripheral vision. He wouldn't be able to have seen this huge range of what was going on his side if he were in that state of fight or flight. And he was able to take advantage of memory skills where certain players were and what their strengths and weaknesses were. I mean, all sorts of things kick in, functioning on all cylinders. But just think about how much more mental space you would have if you weren't worrying so much.
Think that a lot of times young people think that there's one way to succeed. There's one way to think. And that's also influenced by the way we've set up our schools. You know, you do better in school if you're the type of person who likes to sit and listen to someone talk and then do a bunch of homework. And, there's a process that tends to work for some people and not for others. And for the ones who think differently and have a different process, they can feel that, oh, I'm not smart. And that's not the case. And I see what you're saying about the benefits of meditation for a young person is that it helps to kind of get that intelligence that is just stored up in lots of different parts of our brains to get it to funnel out into a specific way that can be expressed that other people can see and you can see for yourself. You're just like opening up that treasure chest, and meditation helps you do that.
Yes, and you've hit the nail on the head, because there's not just one kind of intelligence. All of us have intelligences and strengths that no one else has. We're all unique. And as an older person, I would say this: we need you. We need your strengths and abilities and your unique gifts to pass on to the rest of us, to pass on to humanity and the world. And it's going to be thwarted if one's constantly stressed out. Another aspect to all of this is that at the end of the day, over your lifetime, there's somebody who's going to be with you throughout your lifetime, and that is you. And this is one gift that you can give to yourself, because you're always, you can depend upon yourself. It's one kind act of compassion that you can give yourself to calm down and to comfort yourself.
Yeah, that's right. And be your own best friend,
Yes.
and get to know yourself, because inside you, if you're only focused externally and what other people think and say about you, you are missing the most wonderful friend that you could ever have. And that's the you inside of you.
Yes.
And I realize that for a lot of people, there are a lot of barriers, because if you've been taught or told that you're not that great, or you're not that important, or, you can't do anything right. And some kids grow up with those kinds of messages. It can be hard, but that's where meditation can help you to tap into the parts of you that are loving and kind, and can be loving and kind towards yourself. So
Yes.
I wanted to start to wrap it up. Can you recommend places where somebody could go to physically learn meditation? What would you suggest if someone said, I want to learn more about meditation, and I want to do it kind of in person and be part of a group and find some place to belong. And I want to let you know, and also our audience know, that we do have guided meditations on our website, bbgtv.org. And I will put your meditation, Dr. Candelaria Greene, on bbgtv.org, just the meditation that we did as well. So people can access that at any time they want to have it. And then we also have our guided meditations in our YouTube channel. And the YouTube channel is bbgtv. So where could you recommend if somebody wanted to not just do it online, but actually have a physical experience?
I will certainly address that. But before we go, I just want to make sure that folks remember, just review the ABCD plus of attention and breathing and calming the nervous system and doing positive acts of generosity towards yourself and others. I just keep that in mind.
Yes.
So what I would do is I'd recommend these free programs, basically to get going, your wonderful program, but also free programs on the internet. The one go-to program is what's called the UCLA Mindful app. And this is great. They have group guided meditations, and it's free. It's even in other languages like Armenian and Cantonese. So it's in a number of languages. They're drop-in meditations. It's wonderful. And they're short ones, long ones, etc.
We'll put some links in the description.
Yeah.
Well, we always ask all of our guests for this podcast before they go to share who made a difference for you in your life when you were growing up. And I'll just kind of remind everyone why we asked this question. Bounce Back Generation has developed our 6 building blocks for resilience. These are 6 things that we identify as being basic needs that we all have. And that we should not feel bad about needing and wanting and even demanding from our institutions or organizations, et cetera. And those 6 building blocks are protection. So we talked about that, the need to feel physically, emotionally safe. Relationships, having at least one person in our life that we can count on and trust and depend upon. Coping skills, which I would put mindfulness and meditation in the category of coping skills. These are skills that make us feel good today and even better tomorrow. Can do, which is being able to feel confident in ourselves and our ability and finding things that we love and are good at that are special to us and really giving ourselves permission to do them. And belonging, having a place or people that we feel connected to and accept us for who we are. And finally, storytelling, owning our stories and being able to tell what happened to us. And that's how we recognize our resilience. And when we tell our story of what happened to us and how it got us to where we are today. And that story can also help build strength and resilience for those who hear it. So
Wow. That's
So
wonderful. And so many of those things, of course, we know in the literature are the building blocks of I was thinking of even Albert Einstein having so many of those things going for him, or just people who lived to ripe old ages have those things going for them.
That's right. That's what they'll tell you is like, that's what got me here is I had, safe place to go to and I had, et cetera. So when we tell our story of who made a difference for us, it can really help to show how other people in our lives when we're growing up. And sometimes I'll tell you, some of the stories are someone that they met for one time in an elevator and made a huge difference. And for some, it's the people that were there for them every day. So do you have an example of somebody who made a difference for you when you were growing up?
I certainly do. And I love the opportunity to talk about her. Sister Madeline. I met Sister Madeline when I was in high school, and she had been a nun, a Catholic nun in Belgium during the Second World War, and she had been a teacher of students with intellectual disabilities in this residential school. Well, it was during the Second World War, and the Nazis wanted to take away these students. And so anyway, she led heroic efforts to safeguard these children. So they survived the Second World War. And afterwards, she and her order went to my hometown of Stockton, California, and they started doing recreational programs for individuals with intellectual disabilities on Saturday afternoons. And I thought it was fun. So I'd go there and volunteer. Well, after a while, she came up to me and said, well, Jamie, if, we have these residential schools serving students with intellectual disabilities in England and in Belgium. So if you ever want to volunteer, just let me know. So I said, sure, that sounds like fun. Well, I did. I volunteered at the school in England, and I also volunteered at the school in Belgium. And that not only solidified my interest into going into special ed, but it had a tremendous effect on my interest in different cultures. And I became actually a French language major in college first, along with going into special education. And I began through those experiences, I began to really appreciate not only how health conditions can affect learning, but also social and emotional influences can affect learning. So, and it all really started, talking about acts of generosity. She was so generous in her volunteerism, and that set such a good example for me to want to be generous myself. But it was fun. I later joined the Peace Corps and served in Kenya, and it was all fun. So I think it would be Sister Madeline.
Thank you for listening to the Small Powerful Things podcast. I'm Jennifer Dillon with Bounce Back Generation. Visit our media website, bbgtv.org, or our YouTube channel, bbgtv, to learn more about our other 6 building blocks for resilience, which of course include coping skills. Mindfulness is just one tool to keep in your back pocket. If you look to the description, you'll find some mindfulness resources to help you get started on your practice. Thanks for listening. We're glad you're here.